From the Roman Empire up into the United States right now, the same mistakes are made over and over again. Truly, history repeats itself. Eventually, the rug's going to be pulled out on this trust train. And when it is, if you're not out of the system, it'll be too late. They're going to try to sell us this central bank digital currency that it's better. But in reality, when they make that change official, that's when trust is going to be completely lost. And all fiat currencies will hyperinflate. Two different systems, a communist socialist system and a true free market capitalism system. And thankfully, because there is some essence of free market remaining, we're seeing Bitcoin and the internet economy outcompete any currency of any real world economy. And that trend is going to accelerate. Bitcoin is that engineered money that can do what gold and US treasuries could never do. Deliver you the hardness, but also the fast, cheap, and easy and secure settlement. If there's any coin or any project out there that says we're competing with Bitcoin, you shouldn't get near it with a 1,000-foot pole because it's a scam. We already have perfect money. It's Bitcoin.
I have you on my podcast because someone else said you are an OG Bitcoin Maxi, and I should have you definitely on. So, first question to you: would you self describe you as a OG Bitcoin Maxi?
I would describe me as a Bitcoin Maxi. I mean, what does OG really even mean? I guess this is my 10th year in the space, so I do have a couple halving cycles under my belt, but anybody is an OG Maxi who can embrace the mindset that Bitcoin is engineered money, that Bitcoin is the solution to a lot of the problems that we're facing today. So to me, OG means that you've evolved your mind. You've learned from the failures of fiat currency experiments, and you've come to the conclusion that the fiat currency system isn't going to work. So do I have an OG mindset that understands Bitcoin as the reserve asset of the internet economy and the most pristine form of collateral in the world? Absolutely.
And this is perfectly a lineup for the question. Like, you probably think that fiat currencies will collapse at some point, right?
Yeah, that's a really tough topic because a lot of people ask me that, like, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? Well, I've studied a lot of different fiat currencies, like more than I should have, to be honest. My time could have been better invested somewhere else. But what you learn when you study these is that there's never been a success. I mean, thousands of currencies, hundreds and hundreds of failures. Nothing has ever worked. From the Roman Empire up into the United States right now, the same mistakes are made over and over again. Truly, history repeats itself. But what I've noticed is, even though the economic books will give you the definition of hyperinflation and they try to mathematically define the move from inflation to hyperinflation, I disagree with that. I find that the only difference between inflation and hyperinflation is trust. When the people lose trust in the system, when the people no longer trust the government to watch out for their best, when the people understand that the system is being abused and therefore the value of their time and labor is being extracted from them, trust is lost. And once that trust is lost, we will move into hyperinflation, regardless of what's done to counteract it. So to me, there's no mathematical textbook definition of hyperinflation. It's the loss of trust that shifts us from inflation to hyperinflation. And do I think that's going to happen? Ask yourself a question. Do you trust your government more today or more yesterday? Which way is the trend of trust going? Eventually, the rug's going to be pulled out on this trust train. And when it is, if you're not out of the system, it'll be too late.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And it's fascinating for me that when I talk with Bitcoiner, most of them think that fiat will collapse at some point. It just cannot live on for longer. But what I wonder is they always come up with something. Like they always come up like the euro failed, but let's invent a new currency. It has this and this new fit. Like, what do you think will probably happen? Like when there's a Bitcoin standard, there's a time before that, and I think there's a time after that. Let's focus on the time before that. What do you think government will try to do to keep the currencies alive? Is the digital euro, is the central the CBDCs part of that to keep it running longer?
Absolutely. Central bank digital currencies and look, what happened in the 70s was this country was sold out from itself. It was raided, and our whole economy was basically transitioned or sold to China. So everything you see happening in China today is the testing ground for everything else. And look at what they're doing in China. They have over 700 million CCTV cameras. They're issuing credit scores based on social interaction and social behavior. It's a complete control system, but they're not going to sell it to you like that, right? They're going to sell it to you in a good way. Like for every cash dollar you turn in, get 2 central bank digital currencies. There's going to be warped incentives. There's going to be tricks. There's going to be lies. There's going to be deception to try to tell us that the central bank digital currency is better for humanity, that the central bank digital currency is the evolution of money, when in reality, Bitcoin is the natural evolution of money, and fiat is a scam. It's not even money, it's currency, right? Gold was money because that's a hard money with all the characteristics of it. Bitcoin is an engineered money. It's gold 2.0. CBDCs are going backwards. It's devolution. It's complete control. It's trying to take over the free market price signal. It's trying to give the governments complete control over resource allocation. That's the main goal with this central bank digital currency. And I think much like in Weimar Germany, where they were having hardcore inflation, but it wasn't quite hyperinflation. Trust wasn't lost yet. They came out and released a new currency, right? And they had this big agenda and a great, probably, akin to today's style. It was a fantastic PowerPoint presentation. It was a great deck, right? You've seen this and you're like, oh my goodness, it's got all the keywords. It's beautiful. This is going to work. We can sell this. Well, the people didn't buy it. And as soon as they launched that new currency, the trust was lost. And in Weimar Germany, they shifted from inflation to hyperinflation. I see the same thing coming here. They're going to try to sell us this central bank digital currency that it's better. And they're going to have all these lying talking points and deceptions, and they're going to speak it as truth. But in reality, when they make that change official, I think at that time, that's when trust is going to be completely lost, and all fiat currencies will hyperinflate.
Do you see a good transition? Like I think, like when I talk with people about Bitcoin, there are those people that's like, okay, let's try it, let's see, and put it as a luxury item, like 1.5% of my portfolio in there. Someone's like, oh, it's too speculative, I don't want it. There's so much fun out there, and it's like when you talk with them, you can read the headlines of the newspapers. They're reading them in your face. How do you see this transition happening? Are people just forced into Bitcoin because at some point it's so obvious that it's the best store of value ever? Or do we actually have to educate them? Like, how do you see this transition to Bitcoin, and why Bitcoin explanation?
Yeah, so 2 points to make on this. The first is that I do think, and Snowden came out and said this the other day, which is that they're going to have to, governments are going to have to come out and admit, or information will be leaked that a big government is accumulating Bitcoin without admitting it. At some point in time, governments are going to have to admit it. Look at what's happening at El Salvador. El Salvador was a broken country. It was a dangerous country, and it was laden with debt. And now they're paying off their debt. And what's happening is, because they are holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet, the asset side of their balance sheet is growing. And what that does is it shrinks the liability side of their balance sheet. And you see JP Morgan increasing their credit. The credit agencies are increasing their credit. It's not going to be long before governments figure out that lending to each other is not the most risk-free form of lending, but lending to a Bitcoin-backed economy is the least risk-free form of lending. That's a big thing that's going to happen that I don't think the market is talking about right now, how Bitcoin changes the paradigm for what qualifies as risk-free. Government debt is not risk-free. U.S. treasuries are not the risk-free rate of return. Bitcoin is. And a hybrid debt-based Bitcoin commodity credit market like we're building at People's Reserve is going to be the future of Bitcoin setting free market interest rates, not central bankers. So that's a really big transition that will be forced on everybody just based on natural economic incentives. The first thing you said, though, that is also very interesting is people are like, oh, it's too risky, 1 to 5% allocation. Their mindset is completely backwards because they're laboring for fiat money. So in their eyes, that when they labor for the fiat currency, that's like their base unit. That's like their least risky unit. But in reality, the dollar that we trade our labor for, the dollar or for any fiat, that is the risky investment. You should take whatever you earn from your labor and pay your bills, but whatever's left over, run from it as fast as you can. You can't save in it. You can't look, if you think you can save in it, then you're not good at math. So listen to somebody who is good at math and telling you, you cannot save. Real rates are negative. Real interest rates are negative. The rate of inflation is higher than the rate of interest earned. Therefore, you're losing purchasing power. You can't do that. And they still have this mindset that they're running into the fiats for safety, that 1 to 5% is too risky. Well, Bitcoin is money. So your allocation to money should be 100%. That's what your allocation to money should be. And then your wants and your desires and your needs, like a home and food and transportation, that takes away from your Bitcoin. That takes away from your allocation. You have to take portions of your labor and trade it off in order to have those things. And then your wants and desires further take away from your allocation. So your Bitcoin allocation should be 100%. And if it's not 100%, you're not an OG Bitcoiner and you don't really understand what's happening here. What's happening is the governments are transitioning us. There's a huge transfer of wealth taking place right now. And all of your lines of questions are great because they tie together. That loss of trust, the forceful transition. They want to go to the central bank digital controllers, a centralized control system that gives the power to set prices to everything, not just interest rates. Bitcoin is coming along in a decentralized fashion and saying, no, we don't want anybody to control our money. We want everybody to have the same rules. And we want a system that doesn't favor any one person, no matter how big or small, over another. So what we see is two different systems, a communist socialist system and a true free market capitalism system. And thankfully, because there is some essence of free market remaining, we're seeing Bitcoin and the internet economy outcompete any currency of any real world economy. And that trend is going to accelerate.
I also think a lot about what happened in Germany with the two sides of Germany with the wall and everything that came down like not that long ago, actually. And you see just different developments with free market and communism. And what I see with Bitcoin and the loss in trust, like I stack purposely for people I love around me that don't get it now. Because I think I want to care for them because just because they don't get it does not mean they don't deserve it, because I love them and I want to care for them. But so many people don't have this, like they don't have some Bitcoiner in their sphere and they don't get it maybe. And do you see, like, from all these things coming up, some social conflicts arising, something that could be like even World War III scenarios like for that? Like, is there something you see, like there's loss of trust, there's something new coming up, systems are taken down, new systems are coming up, governments are going wild? Is there something you see on the horizon? Obviously, I want a peaceful revolution, a peaceful transition to a sound money system, but there can be a scenario where it's just not peaceful. Unfortunately,
yeah. I mean, we all know the New World Order, the World Economic Forum, the powers that be, whatever you want to, whatever name you want to give them, they're saying is order out of chaos, right? So they kind of want this chaos to come because out of that chaos, they can rearrange the order to their liking. And I think what Bitcoin does is it actually gives us a chance to have I want to make sure I use the right word here. I think Bitcoin gives us the chance to have that peaceful transition. And the reason I say that is because as long as Bitcoin is priced in fiat currency, it's going to perform exactly as it was designed to perform. It's engineered money. So what people need to understand is that if they print money and abuse the system, as long as you spend the money that you need to spend on your bills and then you take your savings and you put it in Bitcoin, you can't be harmed. There's nothing that they can do to you. So it kind of buys us time. I look at the traditional system and I look at treasury notes and I look at rising interest rates and I look at the base layer money collateral of the entire system breaking down in front of everybody's eyes. And I say, wow, the foundations of finance are falling apart. We are cracking at the seams. And then Bitcoin comes in and a lot of people look at it as like this big sword that's going to come and just destroy the old system. I think we're seeing vertical integration of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is being institutionalized as digital gold on Wall Street. Bitcoin is being recognized as the risk-free rate of energy for energy producers. Bitcoin is being recognized for heat capture, and waste capture for the good of the environment, and being vertically integrated into those businesses to increase bottom lines. The free market incentives are very powerful around Bitcoin, and we're seeing those incentives drive the marketplace. And those incentives, to no one's surprise, that has an OG Bitcoiner mindset, is out incentivizing the traditional TradFi incentives. So if we can continue to see this happen, I'm hopeful that we can have a peaceful transition, and Bitcoin can be there as that engineered money to help us navigate this transfer of wealth. But that's just what I want. It's definitely plausible that we don't have a peaceful transition, and out of that chaos, we see CBDCs, we see tyranny, we see all of this stuff pop up. We've kind of seen it already from COVID, right? Like we're still in the fall. That the governments want you to believe, oh, we recovered from COVID, everything is fine. Now we're on to new higher levels. That's behind us. We're actually living through the fallout of COVID. This is the inflationary recession. Prices still go up. You feel richer, but your standard of living and your quality of life decline. And Bitcoin, for us, it protects us. It protects our standard of living. It protects our quality of life. And people who are not having Bitcoin, and even just a little bit of exposure to Bitcoin, like you said, 1% to 2% in Bitcoin, and people feel comfortable because that's how effective Bitcoin is. But really, you got to be at 100% Bitcoin because it's the only money. It might actually be the first discovery of real money in humanity. I'm not sure gold actually qualifies. Bitcoin is so important to what humanity can do as we move forward that I hope we have that peaceful transition where Bitcoin can slowly become part of the system and be vertically integrated rather than a complete collapse and rebuild.
I love it. Bitcoin as the first actual money discovered. I never thought about that because I usually, when I orange peel people, I ask them, okay, what's the perfect money look like? And then they tell me the properties they think that's suited for money. And then I'm like, okay, you just described Bitcoin here. Because if you actually ask people what they want from money, they instinctively know what good money is. They're not like, oh, I wanted to keep my value. I wanted to spend it everywhere. Like the things that they contribute to perfect money is Bitcoin. And before we go on further in the conversation, I just wanted to one question came up to me when you said like Bitcoin should be 100% in Bitcoin. I totally agree with that. And when we go to the scenario where there's not this peaceful revolution, but there is an unpeaceful revolution going on. What can Bitcoiners do that already are 100% in Bitcoin to prepare or like be cautious about that? Is it no KYC buying, coin trading, mixing, self-custody? Do you have any like recommendations for people that to prepare for stuff like that?
Yeah, actually, I do recommend that people own some gold and some silver. And the reason I say that is because if the systems collapse, you're not going to be able to move your Bitcoin back and forth. You're going to have to wait. Like it's going to be there. It's not going to disappear. It's going to be there for you. Everything's going to be fine when the systems come back online. But as the systems are offline, to me, in one of those doomsday scenarios where at this point, we're hoping and praying that's not the case, but it's plausible. So you have to be prepared if something's plausible. And I think having a little bit of gold and more importantly, I think silver is important because historically, that's barterability, right? So let's just say the internet or systems go down and we don't have mass communications for 3 months, maybe 6 months. What are you doing in those 3 to 6 months? Like Bitcoin's going to do its job. It's going to protect your value. It's going to be where it is. But in the meantime, when we're trying to figure out some societal and culture issues, what are you doing for security? What are you doing for barterability? That 1 ounce of silver might be able to buy you a worker for a whole day. So have smaller than even 1 ounce of silver. Be ready to barter. Be ready to have a community behind you, right? Because what do you need? You need water. You need food. You need energy. You need security. All of these things in that doomsday scenario, you could be a Bitcoin billionaire and it won't matter if you're not prepared for that plausible outcome. So there are some other things we have to pay attention to, but once you get those things checked off your list, you're able to protect your family. You're able to barter, God forbid, if the grid goes down for a little bit, and you're able to produce some food or water, or at least trade with somebody who is. Go out and meet local farmers. Go a little bit out the suburbs and start meeting some of the farmers. See if they'll take Bitcoin. Establish relationships. Build community. Go face to face. Don't stay in Bitcoin Twitter. Don't stay in the internet. Make real world friends and real world connections. Strengthen those networks, because if shit hits the fan, it's those connections that are going to save you, not Bitcoin. So that's I think that's a really great question and an important mindset for people to have, that to understand, yeah, if everything stays together, Bitcoin's going to do everything it needs to do for me. But if things fall apart, you still have to be able to protect yourself and your family. And Bitcoin will enable you to do that too, right? Because it's increasing your purchasing power. I'll add on one thing because of what you said before you asked the question about Bitcoin as money, the perfect money, and maybe the first form of money. Because if you think about it, even gold, what's really interesting is I have an analysis on my Twitter. Everybody should check it out. It's called value versus cost versus price. And what I've found in my studies is that the confusion between value, cost, and price, it just creates the misunderstanding that people have right now that makes them feel safe in dollars. But if you understand the basic laws of economics and price discovery, and you understand the relationship between a value proposition, a cost of production, and a market price, well, then you start to really understand Bitcoin's engineered design. Because the value proposition of Bitcoin is money. Well, the base layer of demand for money is larger than anything in the world, because it's 50% of every single transaction in the world. So there is no base layer demand. It doesn't matter for your gold and your silver, for your electronics and for your jewelry and dentistry and all that. No. The largest base layer of demand in the world is money. So the value proposition of money is global GDP divided by 21 million. And that's where the infinity divided by 21 million meme comes from, because the potential of humanity, the potential of GDP growth is limitless. So it's global GDP or human potential, which is infinity, divided by the 21 million coins. That's the value proposition. Ultimately, price, the market price, will get to the value proposition. But how does it do that? Well, it does it by cost being pushed up towards price. That's the engineered design of Bitcoin. When you look at gold, when the cost of gold goes down, the price of gold will go down. So the gold, I say gold is not actually money, and Bitcoin is the first discovery of money, because one of the most important characteristics of money is that it's hard, because it holds and stores its value. Well, if the gold supply can be increased, you hear some people going into the halving. Bitcoin is now the hardest money in the world. No, it was the hardest money in the world from block one, because it's just an inflation schedule. There were 21 million and that's it. And that's when it became the hardest money in the world. Just because the inflation schedule, just because the issuance rate is now going lower than the rate that we can pull gold out of the ground, doesn't make it a harder money. It's always been a harder money from its invention, from its discovery. So the price of gold, the cost of producing gold can go down and the price can come down. But what makes Bitcoin so amazing, what makes its engineering so marvelous, is the relationship between hash rate and difficulty adjustment. And as the hash rate goes up, that pushes up the difficulty. As the difficulty goes up, that pushes up the cost to earn. As the cost to earn goes up, that actually pushes up the floor price, because the miners, just like gold miners, they can't sell you the Bitcoin for less than they mine it. And most people who hold Bitcoin, sure, there is a price point that they might let go of it. But if you're an OG Bitcoiner, you buy and you never sell, because one day there's going to be the right products and services that will allow you to borrow against your Bitcoin, and you will never have to sell your Bitcoin. So the goal is to buy Bitcoin and never sell it, because it's engineered money, because of the way it was designed. And there's no other money that humans have used previously that is comparable to this design. Truly, Bitcoin is engineered money, and our first discovery of a true money that will stand the test of time.
And when we now spin this thought further, especially like medium term of our beings, Bitcoin will basically get rid of all the monetary premiums of real estate, of even stocks, of gold to a certain extent. Do you agree with that? Like, do you think that real estate will just drastically be repriced? Gold will drastically be repriced. Stocks will drastically be repriced.
Fantastic question. And this is actually my favorite line of study. It's called cost structure analysis. And what you do as an analyst is you can do it for a bank or a business. It doesn't really matter. It's the cost of production is the natural business 101 line, because no business can offer a service below its cost. It'll go out of business. Shut down your business and go get a job. At least you'll make money. You have to sell your products or services for more than it costs you to offer or produce those products or services. This is business 101. So what that does for us, what that exemplifies for us, is that when you have all of these people and they all need a money, right? We all need a base layer money. If we're all chasing that same base layer money, there's actually two economic rules that are working for us. The first rule is business 101. The difficulty is pushing the cost towards the price as the hash rate increases, increasing the fair value of Bitcoin. And then the second is the demand for it continues to increase. So you get the supply demand equilibrium price pressure. A lot of people don't understand that there are multiple sources of price pressures. So when the government says inflation, well, they're lying, because they're just blaming it on the economy. But inflation's not from the economy, it's from the devaluation of the currency. And all of these are designed to deceive you from the truth behind it all, which is that Bitcoin is your solution. Bitcoin is how you protect and preserve your time and energy. And I'm not sure what's going to make it click for people, but I do think we'll probably see a loss of trust before it actually clicks for people. That will be an amazing time to be alive, I think, because humanity will they say you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. So when people are forced to adopt it, there might be a rough transition, but over time it changes you because it changes your incentive structure.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. I talk with so many Bitcoiners. I have this goal to interview 300 Bitcoiners this year alone. I probably hit over that, like I'm doing every day now. So probably I'm going with 350 or something like that. And for me, it's like even solving homelessness, if the real estate prices are coming down, if they're completely premium, like there's so much craziness going on with that. But
I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent. The cost structure analysis, the monetary premium of real estate and everything else. Sorry, let me dive into this. People get this really confused. And what's so great about cost structure analysis is that the baseline is the cost, and then the price relative to that baseline will tell you if it's cheap or expensive. So if the price is above the cost, it's expensive. If the price is below the cost, then it's cheap. So what's really interesting is when you run cost structure analysis on gold, what you'll find out is gold has two prices: a commodity price and a monetary price. And people get they're like, what do you mean two prices? That doesn't make sense. Well, hear me out. The reason that the way that we'll measure the monetary premium being drained from these assets is as the price gets pushed towards its cost, right? Because the premium pushes the price up above its cost. That's the kicker here. The higher the price relative to the cost, the larger the premium. Now, some of those premiums are created by demand, and a lot of those premiums are created by the corrupt incentives of the fiat system. So when you look at real estate and you say, okay, well, let's first look at gold. Right now, I think it costs the all-in sustaining cost of gold, which, by the way, the Bitcoin Mining Council and Michael Seyr, if you're watching this, would you please come out for the good of the industry and investors of the industry and recommend reporting of all-in sustaining costs, right? We should not only meet the standards set by the gold industry, but we should exceed those standards. The gold industry, the World Gold Council, recommends reporting of miners of their all-in sustaining costs. And that tells us the all-in cost of production of gold. Well, if you look at that cost today, it's around $1,800. So gold is trading just a little bit above that, just a little bit above 2,000. There's not much premium in gold relative to its cost. So yes, there will be some premium drained from gold, but there's not so much that can be drained, because if you drain too much, then the producers won't make any money, and then they'll shut down, and then the supply will drop, and then the price will go even higher until there is a premium that producers can capture and re-enter the market and increase supply. Same thing with real estate. Real estate, where are those prices now? If you want to know if the real estate you're buying is overpriced or not, find out what they call the replacement cost. The replacement cost is the cost of production. How much is it going to cost me to get this basket of commodities? How much is it going to cost me to get all these laborers to rebuild this home? And if you could build a single family home for $250,000 by sourcing all the materials and labor yourself, but then you turn around and you'd have to buy it for $400,000, well, then there's a premium built into that price, isn't there? Because there's a quite a bit of a profit margin from the cost of production to the actual market price. So sorry, I skipped over that, but I wanted to go back into that. There's a commodity price and a monetary price. And for Bitcoin, right now we trade at commodity value because Bitcoin hasn't been monetized. So it's still being treated as commoditized energy in the form of money. It's still, the price cycles are relative to Bitcoin's cost of production. And when the price gets too high relative to cost of production, those are the peaks. And those and the smart miners like CleanSpark, they'll sell their Bitcoin at the peaks. And then when we come back into the discount zone in the commodity cycle, you go from fair value to premium, back to fair value to discount, like this, up and down. That cycle, you have to make the right decisions through that cycle. So there's no doubt, we can see it in the mining companies, we can see it in the cycles themselves. Bitcoin trades at commodity value. But sometime here in the future, when trust is lost, Bitcoin will go up its S-curve of adoption and will move to monetary value. And monetary value is the value prop. That's global GDP divided by 21 million. That's where the confusion comes with gold and Peter Schiff. You hear Peter Schiff talking about gold is at all-time highs, but the miners are so far behind. The smartest thing you can do is buy the miners, because if the price of gold goes up, then the miners have to go up too, right? But Peter, you're wrong. The cost of producing gold continues to go up because of inflation pressures. So the cost to produce the gold and rip it out of the ground and supply it to the market continues to increase, but the price of gold is not increasing as fast. Therefore, the miners of gold are struggling because their profit margins are shrinking. So the price of gold can go up and the miners can fail because the price of gold's not going up as fast as the cost. And if we use cost structure analysis for gold or for real estate or for anything that you're trying to budget for, you can start to answer the question, the most important question that any investor can answer, which is what I'm buying cheap or expensive?
21 Bitcoin is Bitcoin only from day one, and they teach and preach self-custody. This is my go-to exchange when someone asks me, oh, where can I buy my Bitcoin from? This is the easiest entry for Bitcoiners. And if you want lower fees, plus at the same time support this podcast, use code Robin and click the link in the description. It's also fascinating when we talk about cost of production of Bitcoin with mining, because there is, at least right now in the last years, I don't know how it was in the early days, no correlation between the mining hash rate right now and the price. Like the hash rate was at all-time highs when we were like really low. How does this play then in the whole theory?
Yeah, so there is no direct correlation. It's an indirect correlation. That's probably why most people miss it. Because what happens is, as the price goes above the cost, that creates profit. And what miners do with their profit is they reinvest in hash rate to profit more. So there's a lag time between the two. So when we move into the premium phase of the commodity cycle, miners should be selling their Bitcoin that they've mined during the previous bearish phase of the cycle, during the discount phase of the cycle. And what happens is, when they raise those funds, they reinvest those funds to expand their operation. But when they expand their operation and they increase hash rate, they're what happens is miners start to find blocks at a faster than a 10-minute pace. And the difficulty adjustment is designed to target 10-minute block times. So as the hash rate grows and blocks are found faster than 10 minutes, difficulty increases. Well, when difficulty increases, the direct effect on the miner is less profitability, because when difficulty increases, cost moves up. But if cost moves up and price doesn't move up, your profit margin shrinks. So the relationship between hash rate and price is that hash rate drives difficulty, difficulty drives cost, and cost pushes up the floor price of Bitcoin ultimately towards its monetary value, which is global GDP divided by 21 million.
Amazing. It's a great way to look at it. And you also call Bitcoin the most pristine form of collateral. And I love that saying. And I have a question for you. When it's collateral, you basically would lend it out for something. Would you lend out your Bitcoin?
No, I would never lend out my Bitcoin, and I would never advise anyone else to lend out their Bitcoin. That is the biggest problem in the marketplace. That's so fiat. That's a fiat mindset that you're going to lend out your Bitcoin to earn Bitcoin. Break that mindset. Take everything you've learned in school. I learned all the traditional finance stuff in college. I burnt those books in my fire pit with my kids so that they wouldn't be brainwashed by it. This is some serious stuff that people have to swallow. The fact of the matter is that Bitcoin, how do I say this? Let me make sure I say this the right way. This is a sour subject, right? Because you get a lot of these central bankers, a lot of these Wall Street bros that come over and they're like, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. You know, you saw Celsius and BlockFi and Voyager, and they thought they were going to rule the world, but they brought these fiat mindsets into the crypto economy. So they brought the bailout mindset into crypto, where there is no bailout, there is no mercy, and you saw what happened. They got destroyed. So what needs to happen is people need to understand you will borrow against your Bitcoin. That's how it empowers you. You don't lend it out to earn interest. There's no need to. You borrow against it. And when you borrow against it, the equity value, we go back to the example I gave you with El Salvador. The asset side of your balance sheet is increasing while the liability side of your balance sheet it stays the same. So therefore the burden of your liabilities will shrink over time because the asset side of your balance sheet is increasing. So let's say you have like Bitcoin right now is at was it $70,000 or so. So let's just call it $100,000 for sake of math. So you put up one Bitcoin as collateral. You are not lending your Bitcoin to somebody else. That is a bad idea. That is fiat. What you're doing is you're lending to yourself. You're borrowing from your Bitcoin to yourself. So you put up one Bitcoin for $100,000. You borrow $40,000 against it. Here's the risk. If the price goes from 100,000 down to like 42,000, you're going to get liquidated. You're going to lose your Bitcoin. That's a potential thing. But we have to look at this from the borrower side and from the lender side. That's what people forget. They always think about the borrowers because most people are borrowers and very few people are lenders. But from the lender side, when someone posts that Bitcoin collateral, it's an over collateralized loan. And what that means is that there's no default risk. So it's not based on my promise, right? If I posted one Bitcoin collateral with you and then you lent me $40,000, if I walked away from you and never came back, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't care at all because you hold that one Bitcoin as collateral. And if the terms of our contract expire, I think they'll end up being perpetual. But let's just say it did expire. What you would do is you would sell that Bitcoin. If I never came back to pay you back the 40,000 plus interest, you would sell the 40,000 plus interest from the Bitcoin. And then when I did come back to you, the remainder of my Bitcoin would be sitting in my account. And there was no risk to the lender because it was an over collateralized loan. Now let's go back to the borrower side. And I wanted to interject the lender side because it's important for people to understand right now from the lender side, what they consider the most pristine form of collateral is U.S. Treasuries. And US treasuries have worked fantastic, and they solved the problems that gold had. Gold was too expensive to secure and to transport and to settle. It didn't make sense to settle gold. Sometimes you would pay more to transport the gold to settle than you would in interest against the loan. So it doesn't make sense. Gold didn't work as a base layer money that could be used as collateral within a financial system. So they fixed that problem with US treasuries. But the assumption that they made was that the expansion of supply of those treasuries would never be a problem. That's where treasuries are failing now. So treasuries are fantastic because you can settle treasuries cheaply, securely, and easily. But there's a problem. We lost the hardness of the gold collateral, right? Gold was so good because you couldn't expand it. Well, look what the governments are doing to expand treasury debt all over the world. It's too soft. So Bitcoin comes in and it's a hybrid. You get the best of gold and you get the best of US treasuries. Bitcoin is that engineered money that can do what gold and US treasuries could never do. Deliver you the hardness, but also the fast, cheap, and easy and secure settlement. Now we come back to the borrower. The borrower, why would I want to borrow $40,000 against my $100,000 of Bitcoin? Well, because the risk that you're taking, like we talked about, was the liquidation risk. But let's just say things become more steady and we're starting to move up the S curve. And, these 60, 70% downturns now turn into 30 and 40% downturns, right? So at a 40% LTV, you got 60% of wiggle room. Plus, you can actually deposit more margin if you wanted to take the additional risk of losing more Bitcoin. But what comes to fact is that you borrowed 40 grand. And let's say you borrowed 40,000 at 5%. Well, the rate of inflation is 10%. And the compounding annual growth rate of Bitcoin over the last 10 years is 60%. So let's just cut that in half and say that it's only 30% CAGR. Well, you got 30% CAGR working for you on the upside, and you only have a 5% liability working for you on the downside. That's called a self-repaying loan. Bitcoin will enable self-repaying loans, and people just haven't discovered it yet because they're still trying to figure out how can we lend out our Bitcoin and make money. You don't lend out your Bitcoin to make money. You borrow against your Bitcoin to make money. That's the big thing. That's the light bulb that has to go off. And I think there's a couple of people working on that. But me personally, at People's Reserve, we've been stealth building for 2 years. And one of our mainstream products is a self-repaying mortgage powered by Bitcoin. And it embraces the new mindset of Bitcoin as pristine collateral that empowers you as the borrower and reduces risk to the lender. It's a hybrid model that I think is going to take the world by storm.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so fascinating to see what possibilities Bitcoiners and Bitcoin will have in the future. And what I also wonder, what are altcoins doing here? Is it just noise? Is it just gambling? Is it just something that came up because Bitcoin had something like it's? I always compare it a little bit with the .com bubble. Like the really good companies made it through, and like 99% of the companies were washed out. How do you look at altcoins?
Yeah, I think maybe that's being a little bit too nice to some of these shitcoin scams. I think the OG mindset is Bitcoin is money. It's the perfect form of money. It's an engineered money. It was designed to leverage the natural laws of economics and commodity cycles and price discovery to empower we the people. Nothing can compete with Bitcoin. And if you think something can compete with Bitcoin, something's wrong with you. You need to study more. You haven't figured it out yet. So if there's any coin or any project out there that says we're competing with Bitcoin, you shouldn't get near it with a 1,000-foot pole because it's a scam. There's no reason for it to exist. We already have perfect money. It's Bitcoin. If you can embrace that mindset, Bitcoin is the perfect wheel. Now, what are some of these other coins out here doing? Well, when I first invested in Ethereum, it was not sold to me as hard money. It was the idea behind Ethereum was smart contract capability. Hey, you're going to be able to manage your money and with smart contracts, and you're going to need gas to execute those smart contracts. That's the real reason that anybody who loved Bitcoin even dipped their toes in that Ethereum ICO, because, oh my gosh, talking about different ways to manage my Bitcoin with smart contracts, and I need gas to execute some of these contracts. It could be an options contract. It could be like a discrete log contract that's on Bitcoin, any type of contractual agreement, and I'm going to need gas to execute it. And I want to build contractual agreements based on my money. So now you see Ether coming out here and talking about we're hard money too. You guys are fools. You're going up against a quantum computer ledger that is Bitcoin proof of work. You have no chance. You switch from proof of work to proof of stake. Game's over. Where my interests lie is Bitcoin is that pristine wheel. Where's the cart that I can connect to the wheel to make me productive, right? Because if I have a wheel, that's fantastic. But if I connect a cart to the wheel, now I can start to do work. And that's really important concept that I think some OG Bitcoiners need to kind of understand. And I'll give an example. I think stacks. I've been telling my followers about stacks since the bear market lows of sub 20 cents. And I think now we're up to like $3.70. I have never experienced anything like I have with Ethereum, from under $1 to where it went to. Stacks is the first thing I think that has that type of growth potential, because it's everything Ethereum was supposed to be. And the real innovation behind Stacks is that it's not some other coin. What makes Bitcoin Bitcoin was proof of work. It's the proof of work algorithm that makes Bitcoin Bitcoin. That's why Ether was proof of work, because the value was in the proof of work algorithm. But we just needed proof of work with smart contracts. But what they did at Stacks was they evolved. And what happened is we hear of this proof of transfer algorithm. Now, you don't hear anybody in the space talking about proof of transfer because they just don't know about it yet. But they will know it. It'll be a household name, because really proof of transfer leverages proof of work. And there's no need for any other type of structure, DAGs, all this other shit that these shit coins try to sell you on why they're better. We don't need it. We only need proof of transfer, because proof of transfer leverages the network security of proof of work for the proof of transfer chain. And then furthermore, the way it works with Stacks blocks is the miners have to bid Bitcoin to earn the Stacks block. And then what happens is the miner who wins the Stacks block, the Bitcoin that was bid on the block gets distributed to the stackers. And then the miner who won the block gets his portion of that Bitcoin distribution, but then also a Stacks reward. What that does is, and this is huge, people need to understand this. There's only 4 ways to buy Bitcoin in the world. 1, labor for it. 2, mine it. 3, market buy it. 4, stack stacks. What that does is it makes the fundamental value of stacks a derivative of Bitcoin value, because now I can buy stacks to earn Bitcoin. That's what proof of transfer does. That's how proof of transfer leverages the Bitcoin quantum computer ledger network to empower itself. This is so far beyond Ethereum or any other L1 out there where you have to go to do all this bridging stuff. I truly believe that the only reason for these altcoins to exist is to complement Bitcoin. And there's no other ecosystem on my radar that complements Bitcoin the way Stacks does. Because without Bitcoin, Stacks couldn't exist. Without Bitcoin, could some of these other chains exist? Absolutely. Matter of fact, without Bitcoin, they probably claim they were money and try to compete for the market. But Stacks, it can't exist without Bitcoin. It's a complementary L2 that is the cart to the Bitcoin wheel that makes Bitcoin evolve from digital gold to digital collateral, from a $12 trillion store of value market to a $100+ trillion money market.
It's always fascinating for me when it comes to layer 2, because I have to do so much more research work on that. First of all, like you have to admit where you just have a blind spot, because for me it's the pristine collateral. It's Bitcoin, the layer 1. It's so great. It's such a beautiful invention. It's such an amazing tool, technology that we have, and I'm sure there's a lot of technology will be built on top of that, will be done with that. But the important thing is that we have Bitcoin as the base layer, and then the free market will decide what is on there. And there's like Fedimint, there's Liquid, there's Stacks, there's Lightning, there's a lot going on, and I just cannot foresee. I don't have the foresight to say, oh, this is the future, this is the future. Do you see value in the other layer tools like Lightning, for example, Fedimint? What do you see besides Stacks?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I see value in Lightning. I think Lightning is about monetary velocity, right? Lightning is about enabling you to spend your Bitcoin for coffee, for micro payments, and that's important because that plays a role in the medium of exchange function. But the medium of exchange function is limited relative to the store of value and global base layer equity money. So, a medium of exchange might be a few trillion, but base layer equity is probably close to a quadrillion with the amount of money that's been printed thus far. So you're talking about a multiple of 100x relative. And yeah, Lightning is valuable because it's there to increase monetary velocity. That's a solution to a problem. Stacks can solve that solution as well, but what's more important is that it offers smart contract capability in a decentralized way. And I do think that you're right. The free market is going to decide, and that's why People's Reserve is a centralized company. We believe that not everybody in the world wants to exist in a world where computers decide everything and everything is decentralized and you never interact with another human being. If you want to borrow against your Bitcoin, come into my building, shake my hand, look me in the eye. I want to know who you are. I'm lending you money and you're borrowing money from me. Let's develop a relationship. I think there's still going to be, we're not going into this like technocracy where humans won't interact anymore. And some humans will prefer those decentralized, no interaction solutions. And sometimes those solutions will be more efficient. But the market is so large. We're talking about multi-$100 trillion marketplace. Look at all the central banks in the world. Not even one central bank can handle it all, right? There's so many different branches there's the Bank of International Settlement, the International Monetary Fund. Each country has a central bank, and then branches of those central banks within the country. There's so much volume in base layer money that no one company, no one solution is going to be able to handle it. So we just need to make sure that those solutions are built and ran by true OG Bitcoiners who understand that Bitcoin is money, and the things that are being built are not being built to compete with it, but to complement it.
It's fascinating for me also to see that Bitcoiners, and Bitcoin is a digital money, that Bitcoiners are so down to earth, so nature loving, so they want the connection with human beings. It's kind of the fiat world is that like, oh, I'm isolating myself. I want to be in this screen world, and I want to be only. It's the Bitcoiners are those who buys the farm and lives
Yes.
somewhere out the suburbs. So that's fascinating for me to see. And this, I think, the podcast, when you go back and see the interviews, you see a lot of those personalities in there. For the end of the podcast,
well, when you think about it, I'm sorry. I just want to interject one thing because that's so important what you said about. Very few Bitcoiners that I've met are closed. They're very open. They're very honest. They love justice. They love truth. And if you think about it, we move into a future and we're on a Bitcoin standard. And let's say a farmer has to come to your company and wants to borrow against their corn or borrow against maybe even their Bitcoin treasury. Well, what happens if the liquidation price what if the price goes below their liquidation mark? Are you just going to be a decentralized app and just boop, you're liquidated, too bad, everything that you worked for your whole life is gone? Or would you rather have a relationship with who you're borrowing from, who you're banking with, to be able to call up and say, hey, listen, I can't post this margin today, but in 2 months, my crop is going to be sold and I have contracts, so I know I'll be able to post that margin. Will you work with me? And, it creates a relationship besides just a 0 and a 1, right? The decentralized network is a 0 and a 1, and there's nothing wrong with it. And a lot of times it's going to be more efficient, but there are going to be important things in our society like farmers and engineering and town building and citadel building where if things don't go as planned, you want to be able to shake a hand with somebody. You want to be able to have some type of solution besides the 0 and the 1. And who better to work with than fellow Bitcoiners?
Yeah, and I think this is what you also touched on. Bitcoiners are open. We talked about it right before the podcast that I don't send out questions or something like that, and you don't demand questions. And I have now my 81st podcast, and I think I have 2 podcasts or 3 podcasts that wanted to have questions, but they were like just okay with the questions, like, oh, okay, perfect. And so even like from 81, 2 wanted questions and the rest not, because they're just so open. They like ask me anything. If you have a bad question, I will tell you. So and this is the culture, the community that's amazing. It's just a byproduct of an amazing monetary asset that attracts amazing people. And this is I'm glad to be in this community and that I found that. Yeah, great.
Well said. Couldn't agree more. Well said.
And before we come to the end routine of the podcast, I have one more question. I'm really interested in your opinion on that. What are you now currently researching? Like, I think people always have like this in their life, like a learning phase, different learning phase, and they're like always researching something depending on where they are in their life. What are you now? And it doesn't have to be about Bitcoin. It can be about Bitcoin. What are you now researching deeply? What are you now learning new?
Yeah, great question. And you're right, because once Bitcoiners get down that rabbit hole, people are like, have you gone down the rabbit hole? I'm like, brother, I've gone to the bottom of the rabbit hole. I've planted some dynamite and I've dug a little deeper. Okay. We've gone deep on this. So I love that question. And right now, what I'm studying is relative to what I'm building. So at People's Reserve, we are building that hybrid debt-based Bitcoin commodity credit market with the goal of letting the free market redefine the risk-free rate. Right now, the risk-free rate is based on U.S. treasuries, because if you have a U.S. treasury, you're going to get your money. They have a printer, so they're just going to print it and pay it to you. But what people are learning is, risk-free doesn't mean risk-free, because when they print the money and pay it to me, I don't know what I'm going to be able to buy. There's inflation risk there. So what I'm studying is the thought process behind what defines risk-free in the financial markets. And you heard me say earlier, Bitcoin is the risk-free rate of energy for energy producers. What people don't realize is when an energy producer comes in and builds a plant, sometimes there's not enough demand for that energy. So they're able to produce a capacity beyond in other words, they can produce a supply that is larger than demand. And what you can do with Bitcoin is you can come in and you can capture that extra supply instead of it being wasted. And as an energy producer, there's no profit there. That's a cost, because you're still producing the energy at a cost with land, labor, and everything else. Well, Bitcoin becomes the risk-free rate of energy, because if you got 10 gigawatts of power and you can only sell 5 of it, what do you do with the other 5? Traditionally, it gets wasted. Bitcoin comes in and now it becomes the risk-free rate. It increases the bottom line of your operation, of your business, by capturing that wasted energy. So it becomes the risk-free rate of energy. Well, Bitcoin is not just going to be the risk-free rate of energy. It's going to be the risk-free rate of return, meaning that the commodity credit market that People's Reserve is pioneering will offer the marketplace an opportunity to put the price on money, right? If these central bankers, they can't tell us the price of eggs or milk or chicken, and we say, well, let the free market signal us what the price is, right? It should be based on the supply-demand equilibrium. Let the free market work it out. Then why in the world can they tell us the price of money? There's no difference between the price of money and the price of milk. It should be based on the supply-demand equilibrium. When the supply of money is high and the demand is low, interest rates drop. When the supply of money is low and the demand is high, interest rates rise. It should be a free market price equilibrium, just like everything else. It should not be based on what a group of men dictate that price to be. And Bitcoin is giving us the opportunity to redefine the risk-free rate by allowing the free market to set the real price of money. And that's what I've been studying recently with building People's Reserve.
Really, really cool. And we're having an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest. Sometimes it's a really good question. Sometimes it's a question that just does not fit because you have kids and it's it's just not fitting if you already have kids. But I will read the question anyways to you, and you can do with the question whatever you want to do with it. Will the name of your firstborn be Bitcoin related?
I have 3 kids, and all Bible names. That's everything comes down to the Bible names for me. So when I talk to people, I either talk Bible or I talk Bitcoin, and I don't really talk anything else. You know, people come up to me like, "Hey, did you see that game last night?" No, I didn't watch a bunch of dudes run around on a field grabbing each other. I've been busy. I've been busy building the future. But yeah, I'm glad you saw that match, guy. That's an interesting question. Maybe if we have another one, we might throw something in a middle name, but definitely the Bible takes precedent for us. We name all our kids from the Bible.
Yeah, that's great. I had with Pastor Coin, I think 3 or 4 episodes ago, the whole topic, Bitcoin, Bible, Christianity, everything. It's a great topic and a deep topic also. Also the connection between Christianity, religion, and Bitcoin. But we are already over the 1 hour mark. I will not open this topic now. Maybe we can do it in an episode and in a round 2. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure talking with you. For people that want to ask you questions, they like having questions in their mind about the stuff you said today. Where can they reach you the best way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to say, I love Pastor Coin. Alan's book, Bitcoin and the Bible, is fantastic. I highly recommend that everybody go buy it. If you want to find out more from me, you can just go to my Twitter, which is at CJ Konstantinos. I'm a Greek. That's with a K. And I'm also on YouTube as at CJ Konstantinos. You can reach out to me, comment on my stuff. I try to interact with everybody as much as possible. Check out my profile and get in touch with me, because we are at a critical time. Everybody, you look at one of my most recent posts, I said, we are in the middle of the crash today. We are in the middle of the crash right now. Everybody can look around you and see the quality of life and the standard of living is going down. Just because the number goes up does not mean everything is okay. Remember, everybody in Zimbabwe and everybody in Venezuela and everybody in the hundreds of other countries where their currencies have failed, everybody was a millionaire, but nobody was rich. We need to pay attention, because now is the time that this transfer is taking place. Thanks so much for having me.
Perfect. Thank you. Great ending words.